welcome to Conversations with Dr. Greer. This is Dr. Stephen Greer, and I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is cseti.org, and the Disclosure Project, which is disclosureproject.org. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Fusion Network for hosting us every 2 weeks to give you an update on our projects and to discuss what is happening with our research and with our contact experiences with extraterrestrial intelligence and the effort to disclose the truth about ETs and UFOs to the world, and to bring out the new sciences and technologies that can give humanity an entirely new civilization of abundance and social justice and peace for thousands of years. And today we're going to have a really great show because we're having again Emery Smith on the show with us, who is the founder and head of a biotech company who has been doing a lot of wonderful technical work and photography, and also is just an amazing person in terms of consciousness and remote viewing and contact with the ETs. And we're going to go through the experiences we had recently in the last couple of weeks up on Mount Shasta, which is a big volcanic mountain in Northern California, not too far from the Oregon border. And Mount Shasta, as many of you may know, is by many people considered one of the 7 chakras of Gaia, of Earth. It's a very interesting place. It has a long history of ET contact experiences that go back to Native American times and before. And there have been many years of contact that CSETI has had there at Mount Shasta. Our first trip there was in 1999. So this was, I believe, our 13th year or so there. And the first year we went, we were in a place there on the side of the volcano, and I did for the very first time one of the meditations that are part of the training program for contact that we have at disclosureproject.org, where I basically did a healing for Earth and for the entry of this age of enlightenment and transition into a time of interplanetary peace and contact and universal peace. And it was really focused on healing the Earth and transforming humanity. And at that instant, there was this massive triangular craft that moved over us and actually turned and signaled to us. And this was an object that is actually on a DVD that we have out with the new book, Contact Countdown the Transformation. There's a DVD that comes with it. And that book is at disclosureproject.org also. And in this DVD, of course, at that time we didn't have night scopes with our digital cameras. They were just regular old high 8 ones. But you can see this object kind of flip on its axis and move. And it was so large that it was seen from all the way from Vancouver down to Los Angeles because it was up in space, but it came over. And it turns out we were out there 5 nights that particular week, and we saw it 3 out of the 5 nights that it came over and interacted with us, as well as all sorts of other contact experiences there. So this is an area that we've gone to and returned to. This year we were at a house that had private land that was surrounded by the National Forest, and it was a wonderful sight. I think everyone enjoyed being there. And so that's kind of the setting of where we were up on this hillside overlooking Mount Shasta and Shastina. So I'd like to welcome now Emery Smith to the show. Emery, thanks for being on.
Yeah, no problem, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you want to share some of the sort of sightings and photographs that you got this year. I think it'd be great for folks to hear about that, because there were some amazing ones that occurred.
Yes, absolutely. We had just, number one, amazing contact that was happening all night long throughout the CE5s that week. But within the first couple of days, we actually got some really good photographs of just some amazing things that were going on. There seemed to be a lot of contact actually behind us, Steve, that started throughout the week. And I do believe this is where the entrance point or a portal was opening, where these ETs were coming through and other transdimensional objects. One I'd like to point out would be that blue. If you remember over by Hollis there was a blue type of light that came into the picture. And when we looked at it, it kind of had like skull features to it. But I'm not sure if it was an actual ET or maybe some sort of ET device, but it was a crystal clear picture.
Right.
And we did have that frame open for about 20 seconds when it came through. So that was one of the significant ones. Another one that we had was...
Let me comment on that a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll do this back and forth with each one.
Okay.
What was happening during that particular event, we had done the meditation where we go into deep consciousness. I had done a puja, which, of course, everyone on the World Puja Network knows what a puja is. And then we were doing a Vedic meditation. And we were in this expanded state and higher consciousness, remote viewing in consciousness, what I was seeing, a very large craft that was around us and above us, but was shifted faster than the speed of light. So we were having a lot of electromagnetic activity with these electronic detectors on site. And I then saw, a couple people saw this light come in to the circle that was by one of our team participants that Emery's referring to. And he was taking a photograph, and this, what appears to be some type of either being or it's very hard to tell. It really does look like some kind of upright being, but with beautiful blue colors, was there between two people, actually, as if they were integrating themselves in our circle, because we always sit in a circle while we're in these meditative states under the stars. And every night was just crystal clear, perfect weather. And around this time also, we had a number of sightings above us. There were some really beautiful blue-white craft that occurred throughout the week, and that night in particular, I remember seeing two. One of which was almost like a liquid golden ship.
Right, golden.
Yes, and you saw it as well, right?
Yes.
And it was it's hard to describe, but it's like it's alive, and it was very close. It wasn't something like a dot out in space. This thing was sizable. But what happens, and so people who are new to this show, when you deal with civilizations that have the ability to dematerialize and rematerialize, which of course is a Puja Vedic city, SIDDHI, these civilizations that are interstellar have this down to a technological science as well as the science of consciousness. So their ships can be hovering around you, but shifted in a resonance field beyond the speed of light into what some would call the near etheric or astral, or the interface between the worlds of light and the linear three-dimensional space-time. And they can be right there, and we'll have electronic communication going on in these remote areas like we are talking about, and suddenly it's almost like they just pop into this dimension, and they pop in, and then they're gone. They may be there a fraction of a second, 4 or 5 seconds, or whatever. And some of these we're actually getting on photograph. A lot of people say, well, why don't they hang around for longer? And it's because there's a lot of military activity when we're doing this that are trying to monitor, and they have, unfortunately at times, fired electromagnetic weapons at these craft when they've been near us. And this is something we observed directly at Mount Shasta. So what happens is that they'll pop in and out, and then there will be sort of the equivalent of what I call a electronic astral projection, where the ET beings themselves will begin to be seen as these shimmering forms and energy forms in the circle. And some people, at this particular week up at Mount Shasta this year, a couple weeks ago, a number of people were physically touched by them, and as was I, very strongly, actually, on more than one night. And it's interesting because these are not ghosts or, incarnate angels or what have you. These are extraterrestrial life forms, but they have this ability to move in and out of this dimension, and they have technologies that assist with this. So it's a very, very complex science of consciousness. It's where the science of consciousness meets the space age, basically. And so this particular being, we could actually feel his presence in the circle.
Yeah. Right.
And the consciousness of this being and the craft that I'm convinced this being came from, we had actually seen quickly materialize and dematerialize above us. And there are a number of people who were on the side of the circle looking up in that area who saw it. We haven't reviewed all the videotape to see how much of the videotape may have captured it. I know some of them got filmed. And it was very exciting because the instant that Emery took the picture of this vertical blue light that has this, what looks like a head and a skull in it and a being, he said, look at this. And what's wonderful is that there's a viewfinder on, he has a really excellent high-quality digital Nikon camera that, he'll call us over, so we look at it in real time. So there can be no question that this has kind of been photoshopped or, after the fact created. I mean, we see it within seconds of it occurring. And this particular picture is frankly amazing.
Yeah, so there's also two vertical gold lines that are to the right of it, below it, which actually look like they're coming out of the earth, and they're very bright golden. And right at the end of the puja, Steve, if you recall, I remember during the meditative state I was in, I was told to gently open my eyes towards the end, and that's when we both saw that bright gold flash of light, and the God consciousness ship came in just for a moment. And with this gold light that we see from this being, I do think these are all related to that first night and that first time of contact for that first evening.
Right. It did, and it set the tone of things that just kept happening every night, all week long for 6 nights. It was a beautiful experience. And the other thing that was happening is that there was very specific electronic communication through the detectors, and we're going to get into that in a moment. And one of the things that happened, a number of folks had meditations where they sensed or saw that under the earth where we were and under Mount Shasta, there are these like caverns, but they're massive. They're like, hundreds of yards across, large hollowed places that are in this mountain. And the very first night we were there, before the whole group gathered, that Saturday night, Dr. Bravo and I were out on the deck of this house, and we looked, and here were these brilliant white ships that were like light ships coming out of the volcano in an area that was sheer vertical glacial. I mean, there's no question it wasn't a man-made source, and it was from the mountain, and it would interact with us. And this happened multiple nights, all the way until the very last night. And for years, there have been reports of these kind of luminous, tall beings that are very bright with these craft that are like plasma light ships that are seen coming out and around that mountain. And I've always said that one and Blanca Peak, where we go in Colorado, are like spaceports. And the history of this isn't recent. It actually goes back. There are ancient Native American accounts of these sort of beings, because as I think everyone who's studied this subject knows, that we have always had species from other star systems that have been aware of Earth and have come to Earth and back, from the Nazca lines to the Great Pyramids to there's the History Channel show, and Ancient Aliens. I don't like the word aliens, but ancient ETs that have been accounted for in all kinds of accounts. Well, in this area, my sense is that they've been there for a very, very long time. And when I say very long time, I don't mean dozens of years or hundreds of years, but thousands to perhaps millions of years. And what's interesting about this area is that we have had objects that have come straight up from the earth, like Emery's discussing, like this golden light that was coming up that's in the photograph. Now, a year or so ago, one of our camera guys was using a advanced third-generation night scope that's hooked to a digital video camera. And there is this craft that launches up from the mountain right in front of us, goes up, coming up from the earth, not coming from space, coming up from the earth, and it comes over us and then begins to dematerialize, and it begins to kind of corkscrew through and goes out into space. And as it's doing so, it's sort of elongating and shrinking, kind of like an inchworm, because it's right at the crossing point of light and linear space-time. We have this on videotape. It's going to come out in a new DVD, we hope, fairly soon. But it's stunning. And this was coming, however, from the Earth in that area. So we know that this is the case. So, everyone's always looking at the stars, which is important. We do have objects appear and come from space, but there are also these amazing things that actually come from within the Earth, where I'm quite convinced in that area at least there's an extraterrestrial presence that's there, that through the meditation protocols we use, which involve going into doing the puja and then using the mantra meditation and going into cosmic awareness, we can see them, and then we communicate with them with thought and invite them to interact with us in universal peace. I mean, that's the core of the protocol. And as soon as we start doing that, we start having these sort of manifestations of these craft and these ETs around us in ways that are way beyond what you would see in a Close Encounters of the Third Kind of movie, because, that's kind of like, really kind of kindergarten. But when you start thinking about it, well, look, if these civilizations really are traveling from other galaxies and star systems, they can't do it at speeds less than multiples of the speed of light. It would take too long. And so their technologies are what we call transdimensional, and they're transdimensional interstellar technologies and civilizations. And that's why they're appearing in all these amazing ways, including this being that's in this photograph and this corkscrewing craft that's on the videotape from a previous visit there. So anyway, I wanted to give some background for folks on that so they can, kind of visualize as much as you can by hearing, it on an audio radio show, what's really happening around us. And it's really beautiful.
Well, one of the next things, too, Steve, I'd like to discuss is the time when the magnetometer was going off between us and we felt a presence behind us. And that's when many people were talking about these sparkles they saw in the trees, and there was a few people that actually saw a craft materialize in front of the forest behind us.
Right.
We're up against this national forest. There's nothing back there for miles and miles and miles. And what had happened from there is I did take a picture, and then we noted all these beautiful aqua and turquoise and red and these cobalt blue, brilliant specks of light.
It's beautiful. It's like celestial, actually. If you could do a photograph where you would see something that looks like celestial level of light and energy, but in this dimension, that's what this photograph looks like. It's true, and it's within 3 to 5 feet of us. I mean, it's not out in space or something. It's very, very close, and it's stunningly beautiful.
And at this time is when you actually stood up after the meditation and you walked into that field,
right,
of energy. And while you were out there in that field of energy, I mean, maybe you're 10 meters away from us, I saw this through my night vision binoculars, a very bright strobe of piercing white light that I could see actually, not when I'm looking for binoculars, but actually on the outside of binoculars. It was so bright. And I know that I'm assuming that our video cameras also got it, but we haven't reviewed it yet. So I was wondering if you could just explain to us what was going on, because that leads up to my next picture of these amazing things that were happening right after that. So go ahead.
Right, and so I walked out into this kind of field and part of this yard that adjoins the national forest, and the best way to describe it were transdimensional downloads of extraterrestrial beings. We, in meditation, actually heard them walking behind us. And multiple people on our part of the circle, our side of the circle, were touched on the head, on the shoulder, what have you, by these beings. I know one person was kind of like, wow, these are actually here. So when I was walking out there, what I was doing, I put my hands, my palms out, and I'm sort of creating a triangle of energy from my two hands and my third eye, and sending love and welcome to these civilizations. And as I was doing this, I saw one of these very senior and highly enlightened interstellar ambassadors there. And this brilliant flash that Emery's referring to, I saw, and it was just all around me. And, it was a beautiful experience, and I was really welcoming these emissaries, if you will, from other star systems that were appearing in all these sort of beautiful ways around us. And you could feel that they were coming. While they were from other planets, they were from planets that had achieved where humans will be in a few thousand years, where everyone on the planet will be born in cosmic consciousness, where the puja concepts of the Vedic cities, the different abilities and powers of seeing with your inner sight and seeing the future and levitation and materialization and dematerial, all of that will just be commonplace. But these are civilizations that have sort of lived like that for thousands of years, and there was this feeling of just profound sacredness and beauty, but they were also very real and very welcoming, and they were really excited that humans are doing this because they know that this is the age where we're going to go from the fractured world where we are into a global civilization that will be living in peace and that will then become an interplanetary civilization. And that, in the next few hundred years, all these planets are going to be united, and it'll just be an open contact. Of course, we're not there yet, but this is what's emerging, and we're sort of pioneering that effort right now. And it's a beautiful experience because when you actually have these beings around you, you can feel the profound, almost divine level of awareness and love and celestial level of intelligence and brilliant intelligence. I was always struck that from the very first time we were at Mount Shasta and several people on our team saw this brilliant, bright white object and light come from the volcano that shone right into our group. It wasn't just light like you see from a headlight or something. It was light that had within it intelligence, consciousness, brilliance, and it was not just physical. It was also conscious. And what we've learned is that their spacecraft and even their technologies have an integration. They have, if you will, artificial intelligence or intelligence so developed that even their spacecraft are living bio-nano machines that are conscious and awake. And that's what was there as I walked out in this field and was making contact and welcoming them and then inviting them to come back. And so I sort of invited them to come back, and I was told, gosh, we really need to all now, because people kind of up standing around, we need to all sit down and meditate and go into that deep cosmic awareness together. And then you took this amazing photograph.
Yes, I have a remote control, so I can set the camera up anywhere and from a distance push the button, and it takes a picture, and that also helps reduce distortion in pictures. People don't realize that when you're taking a picture on a tripod, just the slightest finger push of that vibration actually sets the camera off a little bit. So it's really good to use a remote control wireless for that. So what happened was during this meditation, Steve and I, actually the group was starting to hold hands, and we were in this deep meditation for quite some time. And I did hear the magnetometer go off a few times during that meditation. And what I was experiencing was these ETs that Steve invited back to the circle actually came into the circle and were looking at people's energies and their DNA. And myself, what I felt, Steve, was that giant Arcturan ET was back once again behind us, right, kind of orchestrating these other ETs and the other civilizations, because there was many civilizations there, not just one, but many. Right. Yes, many civilizations were there, and they were all orchestrating this. And I felt within me the ETs actually working on me. And this is when the magnetometer, and I actually heard footsteps behind me at this exact moment. Right. So I slowly actually let go of your hand, and I hit the button to take a picture. And towards the end of the meditation, we came out of that, and I looked immediately at the picture, and there were these beautiful violet lavender orbs, if you would, that were covering. One was on Steve's heart, and the other one was consolidated mostly to my throat chakra, but it actually went down the sides of my thorax, down right to my solar plexus.
And down your arms as well.
Right, down my arms as well, and also what I would call the root chakra, down by the groin area.
Right.
And these are very clear pictures. You can see the leaves on the trees behind us.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so these are not like distorted pictures where it's like, oh, maybe it's just a blur or something. These are something. Number one, I've never even seen this color on my Nikon ever in my life. It's such this color, I can't even explain it. I mean, it's just like some fluorescent, iridescent, lavender, violet, fuchsia mixed color. I mean, I can't even explain it, Steve. I mean, maybe you could explain it better than that.
No, that's good. I mean, it is. It's like a color you couldn't make up or mix up at
completely celestial. Yeah. It's a celestial color that I can't even explain it. But to the right now of you, Steve, behind you, what was magnificent was this green light.
Right.
That looks like right off your shoulder or behind you a ways, that's shooting up into the air. Now, there's no one that had lasers on through that whole meditation whatsoever. Right. And the angle that this is actually coming in at is actually coming from space.
Right. It is coming from space, correct. I felt like it was coming down from space to right above me, behind my shoulder.
Yeah,
if you look at the picture. Yeah,
the picture actually shows that its trajectory would have actually, it's a perfect trajectory. I already told you this, but I analyzed it. The trajectory of this light intersects with the violet orb on your heart.
Right, correct. Yes, I saw that angle of it, and it was right exactly in the center of my chest over the heart chakra, which of course everyone knows. I mean, I'm an emergency doctor, is electromagnetic, and so everyone thinks that the physical body is so separate from the spiritual world. It isn't. I mean, it's actually the reality is that consciousness and the body of light manifest the physical body in the physical world, not the other way around. And this is something that is a whole new understanding of how, sort of the cosmology, if you will, is organized. And they're doing this kind of contact at that level. What's amazing is that here's a camera that has this crystal clear photograph of these things either on us or within inches or feet of us. And that means it has to be in this dimension enough that it can be caught by a early 21st century camera, which is awesome, actually, when you think about it, because we're dealing with such enormously advanced civilizations that, are thousands to millions of years technologically more advanced than we are, and yet now we're beginning to be able to get these sort of imaging experiences that complement. They don't override, they're not more important than, but they complement the experiences we're having in thought and in consciousness and in our light bodies as we're having contact with these physical ETs that then are appearing in all these amazingly beautiful and mysterious ways.
Yes, Steve. I don't know if you want to go into the experience that you were having at that moment.
Well, one thing I want to mention is another thing that happened that kind of led up to this, and this again was right behind us, is that we were, that kind of opened this portal. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember, Emery, there was this, almost everyone on our side of the circle, in the air right behind where you and I were, was this strange transdimensional, like a snap. It was like, it was almost like, it was like a snap. Mm-hmm. It wasn't up in the wood. It was like with a foot behind us, yes, and in the air. And it was almost like there was this trans-dimensional portal that opened into three-dimensional space-time from these other dimensions that interstellar civilizations traverse as they go from one star system to another. But it was clear they were right there, and it was quite audible. I'm pretty sure we have some really good digital audio equipment that I, in all likelihood, did pick this up. And the reason I think that happened was because there was literally an opening in space-time that facilitated then the ongoing contact that was happening on the site.
Yeah, it was right after that snap that we had some of the most amazing contact come into place for that evening, and that's when we went into meditation as well. But I heard that snap crystal clear, loud, and I think most of the people on our side of the circle heard it. And another thing with these things is they are very directional. The light and the sound is very directional. We could be in meditation, wake up in a meditation, and see a burst of light somewhere, and maybe only one person or two people will see that because the light is just for them. it's very directional, and it comes out. Same thing with these sounds. I've heard, there's many times where I haven't heard a thing, but someone right next to me have heard it, clear as a bell.
Right.
So,
right.
So that, just also what Steve was talking about, the lighting too, when these things are in this dimension, for us to catch anything on there means they have crossed into this dimension and they're emitting some sort of photon, some sort of photonic light that the camera sensors are picking up, or else we would not get anything at all. One of the things that I acquired was a new infrared lens cover, which this lens cover basically filters out everything except for infrared light. And it's something you use during the daytime. And some of the pictures that I took of the site where we're actually going to do the CE5 during the day had these bright lights 3 feet off the ground.
Right. And
I remember that. One of them was actually right over your bedroom. And we're talking at noontime during the day at high sun. So there's things that the human eye just cannot see, and with special lens and filters, we are starting to be able to pick up these different wavelengths that are out there.
Yeah, and I tell people finally there's some technologies that are beginning to get a glimmer of this, but where you really see things is when you're able to go into that beautiful state of calm, clear awareness, and then have your inner sight open, where you're seeing with that inner vision and celestial vision, and then you see the whole thing. You see the craft that are there. You see the ET beings that are there. And whatever we're able to pick up electromagnetically or with cameras or these detectors, it really is just a faint intimation, I should say.
Oh, yeah.
Of what's really happening, but also your physical body, your mind-body complex. I will literally, while this was happening, I was having an electrification effect all the way up my chakras and over the hemispheres of my head, and having this really beautiful experience inside where I was seeing these beings and seeing the kind of work they were doing with humanity to open up and unlock within us. And it wasn't for me. It was kind of like all of us are plugged into each other through the sort of the human unconscious and the collective consciousness. The potential to open up to these higher dimensions of spiritual perception, transdimensional concepts, and higher states of awareness, and that this is actually something that's potentiated by unlocking aspects of our light bodies and how they interface with the physical body. In other words, there's a light body, physical body interface, and that is happening at that level of energy and even at the level of, if you will, the sort of blueprint within the light body that then faces with the genetic effect. And we had this, there's a device that Emery mentioned a moment ago called a magnetometer, and that's just a big long word that says it's a meter that picks up the magnetic field change or flux that's in an area. So, for example, when you turn it on, it has a little kind of like rheostat button where you set it to where it's basically at the baseline of whatever the magnetic field is wherever you are, whether you're out in the country or in a house or what have you. And then if you move towards, say, a refrigerator or a television, it'll go off increasingly as you get close to it. And it picks up that magnetic field shifting because of electromagnetism, which is electricity and all kinds of other things. But what we have found is these devices, although they're kind of crude 20th century era stuff, actually are amazing because the extraterrestrial people we're in touch with have begun to use them to communicate and to at least, in a sense, confirm contact that's happening on a level that's beyond the speed of light and beyond linear space-time and the physical three dimensions. So one of the things that we talked about this on another show recently, and someone wrote in and said, well, gosh, could this be some of these signals, because we played them on one show recently, you may listen to them in the archives of the World Puja Network, and someone said, well, gee, might this be a interference from cell phone or something? And the answer is absolutely not. Number one, all cell phones are turned off. Number two, what I do with this magnetometer and also with the other electronic devices we have is I go around the circle before and after these contact events happened, including after, just to be sure. And I go around literally above each person's head all the way down to the ground and around the whole circle, inside the circle and outside the circle, to see that it's still at baseline. And it is. It's completely silent and at baseline. Even to get it to signal at all with the equipment that's there, I literally have to almost touch the video camera or touch an audio recording system for it to begin to even signal at all. When this contact was happening, which we'll talk about in a moment, there were no such devices that are man-made on us or near us, and it was not the signal that you would get from one of those anyway. It was literally a melodic and complex communication, and when we stood up, Emery and I faced each other, and it turns out at the sort of the base Kundalini chakra going up, there was this emerging pulse. It was, and you can describe it yourself, Emery. It was like it was a spiraling, beeping tone that kept repeating and repeating and repeating, and it would only happen at a certain place where we would line up facing each other, and it was persistent, and it happened more than once. And this was happening while what I was seeing anyway, and you can describe what you were seeing. I was seeing this very large extraterrestrial being that I think is from the Arcturian sector of space or somewhere in that area, and that we had seen this brilliant kind of golden, beautiful craft on more than one night right above the group. And this actually started several months ago, but it's been getting stronger and stronger. And it seems like they're doing something at the level of consciousness and our bodies of light, and how that's interfacing with the physical body and the manifestation of physical three-dimensional reality. And then sort of through the group, everyone listening and being part of this, sort of in that what Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphogenic field, is going out from that place around the world and throughout humanity, doing some kind of amazing potentiation and unlocking of potential within humanity. It's very profound. It's actually physiological. It's profoundly spiritual, but it's also electromagnetic. And what was interesting is that if I tried to do it, somehow this particular ET being lined up with me and Emery, and if I took the magnetometer to any other person, male or female, didn't matter, it wouldn't do anything. If Emery took it to anyone at the exact same place on the body, there was nothing. It was only when he and I lined up, and when we touched each other's on the shoulder with our hands, it then went off the scale. And, of course, we had a PhD physicist there and an engineer, an electromagnetics engineer who had done his work at University of California, who was there, who went, God, you cannot believe this. And it was utterly amazing. And before and after this happened, I did go around and confirm that it was coming from nowhere else. This was not any electromagnetic interference from a cell phone or a camera or anything else.
Right. It went on for quite some time, and even when you had the detector, it wouldn't do it to you, and when I had the detector, it wouldn't do it to me. So there's no device that we both had that it could have, energy could have came out of and activated this thing. This was actually coming. It had a message in it, and it also escalated this time compared to our other trainings up to our throat chakras and our heart chakras.
Yep, towards the end of the week, it was going up, and it was doing this at the level of the heart and then the throat chakras. So it was a profound. Anyone who studied the sort of, it's like the body electric, but it's the whole concept of the light body and the electromagnetic field of the light body and how it interfaces the conscious body with the physical body. And that is very, very real. And here we are actually measuring it with a magnetic field meter, a magnetometer. It's actually just stunning. One of the things that I did after this, and of course this was it was such an almost overpowering experience, not only in consciousness but even physically. But I did go around, and after this happened, tried to see if that would happen. So somehow, between Emery and me, there was an ET that was somehow, the three was creating a circuit. Now, all I can say is there was a circuit formed that would only happen in this state of consciousness after all this sequence of contact began and started happening. And after this happened, I as I went around, with this detector around the circle and to everyone, nothing. It just didn't make any sound at all. So we're 100% certain that this was not an anomaly from interference from anything. I know someone had asked that. And this has actually been increasing over the last year, actually, since we were in France last summer and England. And it's really an amazing phenomenon, because you are not only experiencing it and having it confirmed through these electronics, but there's something going on that's very profound and deep, and it's affecting, our lucid dreaming and meditations and everything.
Right. And another phenomenal thing is, like you said, if we put our hands on each other's shoulders, it actually increased the circuit.
Oh, yeah, it was like a doubling or tripling of the tone and the strength of the signal when we would just put our hand on our shoulders like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. As we were facing each other, at one point, you leaned forward with your head, and I leaned forward with my head, and we just barely touched our craniums together, and the magnetometer actually pegged all the way out for a moment.
Yep. It went off the scale. Yeah.
It went off the scale.
Yep.
And I actually felt and saw with my inner eye a pure one light. It was like one light coming out of both of us, and it was just blinding everything around us, which means I believe this light that we joined together with became us, and that energy that was coming into us actually went out to everyone that was right there.
Right. Everyone in consciousness and listening to this experienced it, and then through the morphogenic field of our collective awareness, I feel it was affecting the whole of the earth. I think that basically we were just kind of openings that we were willing to do this. It's not that we're anything special. It's that we're willing to be open to that energy coming through us, and it did. And the electromagnetic meters that are indicating this is really just something that confirms it for other folks. But where the action's really happening is at this deep, deep level of cosmic consciousness, where the cosmic consciousness and these ET beings that are doing all kinds of mysterious things to help advance the situation on this planet, then connect through the bodies of light and then into the physical 3 dimensions. And it's truly a beautiful experience. For me, it was not only powerful, but really very emotional and awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So that happened actually more than once over the course of the week. And as Emery mentioned, towards the end of the way, I think on the last evening, it actually had progressed. So when we did that, the signal was moving upward into the heart and the throat chakra, and there was this sort of opening and enlightening energy coming up through higher and higher levels. And I think that when this is occurring, that we can measure with these electronic devices and then photograph, as these photographs are beautiful and amazing. But the reality, I'm trying to get to the crux of what's happening. The crux of it is that there is a transdimensional and spiritual energy that we're having through this contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations that's sort of spreading out and to humanity. Because what we do that often activates this whole process, as I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, is that we do our meditation where and actually there is a CD for this at disclosureproject.org, and it's also on the, if you have an iPhone, there's an iPhone app that works on your iPhone and iPad that you can download. That's the CSETI contact app that has all this. And what you find when you do these is that once you kind of get into this calm and deep silent state of mind and begin to remote view the ETs in deep space and make contact, we then do this, it's sort of like a prayer for the healing of the earth, where we send this light up and connect with cosmic awareness and the great being and with these ET civilizations, and then we see the earth, literally see the Gaia, the whole sphere of the earth, and send this from the heart and from the deepest level of awareness, this love and healing light to the earth. And when we do that, that's when all these experiences get potentiated and open. Now, what I feel is that these things that have been happening is in a sense them returning the favor and actually doing work in return for in a sense what we're doing. And it's sort of this exchange happening on a very beautiful spiritual level. It's very Vedic, but now that there are electronic effects that we're recording, and luckily we have Dr. Bravo was holding a really nice new digital audio equipment and was able to record this. And, of course, Emery's getting these great photographs, and then we have two digital night scope video cameras that are getting a number of these objects and craft and things that are happening. So we're increasingly working to document all this, and, of course, we're doing this. Everyone has their day jobs, and they're doing it in their spare time. So we hope, in the next few months to get another edition of this book out. With the one that's out now is Contact, Countdown to Transformation, that has a DVD that has some of these. But in the last 2 years since that book came out, we've had probably a tripling of the number of images and documented events that we hope to get out to the public. But it's just a lot of work to get those things put together. But at any rate, that's what we're have experienced. And there were a number of other people who were there who were having similar experiences. And also we had another person there taking photographs, still photographs, who got a number of beautiful beautiful red and blue spherical orbs and craft in them that were very close. And another photograph, I don't know if you want to mention this, is the one, there was a big, I don't know what kind of evergreen tree it was between us and.
Oh yes, of course. We had a lot of action was happening over and towards that area, and that tree. Many people throughout the training have seen amazing things by this very tall tree. It's one of the tallest trees. And what direction was that?
Northeast, yeah. Northeast, right.
And at one point, I actually had my shutter open when someone said they had seen a craft in the tree.
Right.
And sure enough, on my camera, immediately after the shutter closed, was this, it's very hard to explain, but what it looks like is kind of a square, bright object with actually like a six-legged, kind of like what an ant would look like. It has these things coming out of it on the bottom, if you do recall. Do you recall, Steve?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very beautiful thing. It actually has antenna on it as well. Now, this is about the size of 2 inches at arm's length, and this tree is probably about 50 yards away.
Right.
So it was a very bright object that flashed in, and we've seen flashes coming out of this tree all night long. And this is one of those flashes. It was bigger than a flash. We actually captured the entire thing, and it's right at the top of the tree. And it's probably going to be in the book, I'm sure, or on the website soon. Yeah. So you guys can look at it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's sort of a golden color, too, kind of golden white color.
Right. It starts with a white center, and it's a golden around the edges. And to the back, it looks like a bird tail with just how a bird tail flares out and flanges out.
Yeah,
and that is actually pure red. And on the bottom of it, it has like all these little sticks coming out of it. Like I said, looks like ants' feet, but they're metallic. They're actually not. They're not emitting light. This is the part of the ship that is actually a solid piece.
Right. And what's interesting about this, I want to point out to folks, this is not a photograph. We don't use any flash photography, so there's not the strobe of a camera illuminating dust or something. When you see a lot of orb pictures, if you need to see, of course, if you have your orb on, if you have your flash on and it's at night, most of those are just artifacts. This is absolutely with no flash photography. It's nighttime photography, and this has a light of its own that is emitting and actually illuminating the tree around it. We also have videotape of objects doing the same thing when we've been up at Mount Shasta near us. I mean, we're talking within 100 feet of us or so, or something like that. So those kind of experiences, and that we will see them, and luckily often Emery will have the lens open, or the shutter open on the camera, or after we see it, he'll take a picture in that direction, and it'll flash back in or something so that it will be photographed. And this is very similar to a photograph taken a little over a year and a half ago, and almost 2 years ago now, in Joshua Tree, where we had sort of like a spherical orb the size of a baseball or a grapefruit that appeared near us at a break, and as I came up, I saw it was sort of it wasn't just an orb that was nothing. It was an orb that was sort of a teleportation system for a whole group of ETs, and I invited them back to our circle. When we came back, everyone was at a break talking and having, some water and granola bars or whatever, and I said, we need to get back together, and suddenly we heard what sounded like 3 or 4 people right outside the circle in the desert talking. And it wasn't just one person heard this, several people. But I have these really advanced military-grade night scopes. In fact, you have to fill out the Homeland Security stuff to get them. And I looked over there where the voices were talking, and there was nothing there. It was just empty desert. And I went, oh, boy, they're here. So Raven, a member of our team, went over and with her camera took a picture, and there's this orb in the picture, creating a cone of light, and in the cone of light is this ET being floating above our chairs on just outside the circle, maybe 4 or 5 feet outside our circle or less. And that picture is at cseti.org if you want to see it. So all these things that have happened in the last year or two are mind-blowing. And, it's interesting because you hear about the SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, spending, hundreds of millions of dollars on radio telescopes and stuff. And we're out there with off-the-shelf cameras and, tri-field meter magnetic devices and kind of radar detectors like you can get for, picking up police cars and stuff like that. And we're getting all of this contact. And, it's sort of being passed over by the majority of people, but the reality of it, it's a pioneering level of contact that's getting increasingly documented, and it is, I have to say, a science in its infancy, because one of the things I point out to people, you're trying to document with early 21st century technologies, or at least the technologies they admit that we have. They're in classified projects, they're more advanced things. But what we can, acquire legally. And we're trying to use that kind of technology, which is really all based in late 1800s electromagnetic theory, speed of light cameras. Even if they're digital, it's still that kind of stuff. But we're trying to document the presence and contact of interstellar civilizations that are around us doing things, but whose technologies are thousands to millions of years more advanced, who travel faster than the speed of light and go dematerialize and go into the conscious astral energy field as easily as you and I pick up a cell phone and talk. But I remind people that if you were to go back 200 years and go over here down the road from where I am and visit Thomas Jefferson and show them an iPhone, he would think you absolutely were some kind of a warlock, or it would be unimaginable science and technology, and that's 200 years. We're talking about civilizations that are thousands to millions of years. So there is an element where you kind of have to put all that in perspective. But the beauty of it is this: what God has given us in terms of our consciousness, our mind, our heart, and the physical body, which is an amazing thing. It's more amazing than people realize, is the best instrument and tool there is. Even if we can't document all, that is still the best instrument it is. It's more important than an electronic meter. It's more important than a photograph. And even if our science and technology isn't there yet, it will be someday. it doesn't stop us from using it, nor did it stop the ancient people and native people of America or Africa or India or the Himalayas who had contact with those people in the Vimanas they talk about in the Vedas. And so I want to remind people that the central thing here is understanding consciousness, understanding the Vedas, understanding cosmic awareness, experiencing it, and then practicing these techniques, because everyone can do this. I mean, every awake human being can become awake and in a higher state of consciousness, develop these abilities and have this kind of contact. It is not anything esoteric in a sense. The only reason it's esoteric is because our society has been closed off and miseducated on these things. But that's the whole point of this age of enlightenment that's coming, is that all this, the science of consciousness, will be the central science of the next millennium. I have no doubt about that. And so that's what we're experiencing and exploring. And those of you who want to join us, we are going to be doing a week in the Southern California desert, a really remote place that's going to be amazing, 700,000-acre wilderness. And we're going to be doing that in October. The information for that is at cseti.org. So if you want to join us for that week, I think there may be still a couple of places open for that. And we're going to spend a whole week out there making contact and using these protocols of what we call the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative, where the fifth kind being where we cooperate with and initiate contact with these civilizations. The philosophy of it is that they're here. There's abundant evidence at disclosureproject.org to prove they're here, but we need to create a group of ambassadors and who are enlightened, who understand transdimensional higher states of consciousness and how these extraterrestrial civilizations are going to interact with humans and become, in their own area, ambassadors. And so now we have thousands of people who are doing this all over the world. We actually have a guy on our team, Costa, who coordinates, and like this a couple weeks ago, there was a Saturday night where people all over, there were 80 or 100 teams all over the world that at the same time were doing these meditations and contact, and there were some amazing sightings and experiences that came in and reports. And so, if you want to be part of all that, just, be in touch with us, and it's an exciting development, because I think the more that people do this and understand it, the more it will shift awareness away from the concept of sort of an us versus them reality into the understanding that it's one universe that's conscious. It's a quantum conscious hologram that's awake and conscious, and that we can plug into that and be part of that and then create a whole new world, a whole new civilization on this planet, and that this age of enlightenment and transformation is here, and that all the craziness going on in the world at some point is going to just, that'll be it, and it'll fade out, and we're going to find ourselves at this opening of a whole new civilization, not only in terms of the technologies that will be running the planet that won't be fossil fuel, but will be new energy and free energy and anti-gravity technologies, but the consciousness behind it will be this level of awareness, and that's what's exciting and kind of keeps all of us going. So it's a wonderful experience, and I hope some of you who are listening who want to can join us, or at least get the iPhone app, or if you don't have an iPhone, there's an entire training program that you can get at disclosureproject.org. So I'd like to thank you, Emery, for your sharing and for your awesome skill as someone to take all these photographs and make contact with us.
Oh, you're very welcome, Steve. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, it's been great. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us. And until next time, keep looking up, and God bless.